I have been wearing this Tech Air off-road for over a year now, and I was really interested to check this thing out because it's specifically designed for the adventure rider, but it also works as a street base layer, which works awesome here in Texas where it's hot as balls. The only problem is for the average rider, this thing is way overkill. That's why last fall I picked up this. This is the Tech Air 5, and while I do love this thing, it is a deeply flawed piece of kit. Now, if only there was some way to take the streetability of this and the price point of this and combine all of the really good super user features of something like this.
Fusion! Ha!
Whoa, it worked!
That is exactly what this is. This is the Tech Air 5 Plasma, so named because it actually runs on your blood plasma. So when you're riding down the road, you actually have to have an IV in your arm the whole time. Oh wait, no, hold on. I misread the instructions. It's actually called the Plasma because it's got their new plasma nucleon back protector in here, I assume. But this isn't just the 2025 version of the Tech Air 5. This thing right here is a complete, ground-up, soup-to-nuts redesign of the Tech Air 5 that's approximately 10 million times better. And that's the review. Goodbye. All right, it's disclosure time. This thing right here was sent to me by the fine folks over at RevZilla because I looked at my bank statements and I realized that I had been running a big trade deficit with them, so I told them that they had to reciprocate. So Spurgeon came down to my house and threw this at my door, and now I have it. In all seriousness though, this did come from the fine folks at RevZilla. They're not paying me to say anything nice about it. They don't even get to see the video before it gets live. I just told them, hey, gimme, I'll make a video. And they were like, cool. How did that sound? Is corporate gonna approve of that? I've spent well over a month in this. I've done over 1,000 miles with this thing on, and I'm ready to tell you that this is my new favorite airbag.
Like I said, the Tech Air 5 Plasma isn't just a new colorway for 2025. It's a completely new chassis, new brain, new bag, new canisters, new buttons. Everything about this is completely new. Let's start with the headline grabbing feature. You can now service the canisters yourself.
And there was much rejoicing.
The Plasma carries one canister in the back, which is good for one deployment. After that, you need to unsnap the connector, unscrew, rescrew, resnap, and then you're done. It would be wise to make sure that the airbag itself is folded up properly, but you don't need to, really. I had my off-road deploy on me one time and I just waited for it to deflate and then kept riding. The next feature that's getting everyone all hot under the collar is the inclusion of a button.
The time for talking is over! It's time to push buttons.
Honestly, it sounds silly, but not being tethered to the app is such a nice update. All you need to do is press and hold the button for 2 seconds to switch between 3 modes. You have street, race, and off-road, each with a different algorithm allowing different tolerances before the airbag deploys. I've personally tested the street and race modes. I haven't had any time to get this thing off-road yet, but I will be taking it with me to get on ADV Fest for a full shakedown in the dirt. By the way, if you're gonna be there, I'm doing meetups and group rides, so come say hi.
Now I want to answer a question that I always get when I talk about these airbag vests, and that's why do I choose the wireless and autonomous ones versus the tethered ones? Firstly, the most common type of crash that you see with a motorcyclist is a low side. And in most low sides, you actually don't separate from the motorcycle until your shoulder hits the ground. The sensors on board this thing will detect a crash while it's happening. One of those tethered units only detects a crash once its cord has separated from the container. And when that happens, usually your collarbone's already shattered. Secondly, there's no forgetting to arm this device. The thing does it itself the second you zip it closed. With a tethered system, you might just forget to tether yourself to the bike. I mean, how many times have you left a stop without your gloves fastened or without your helmet strapped on? At that point, you're wearing hopes and dreams in the form of a jacket instead of having something that's actually going to protect you. It is also worth pointing out that the only reason I'm riding without a jacket right now is so that you can actually see the Tech Air. Don't do as I do, and I apologize for blinding you with the paleness of my forearms. The third reason I like this is because the Tech Air systems can detect a rear end collision when you're at a stop, which means that while you're currently getting a Kia Sorento colonoscopy, this thing will deploy before you land on their hood. But since we are talking about safety equipment, I do want to mention another piece of safety equipment that I'm always wearing that's a whole lot less subtle. This thing right here is my brake-free helmet light, and the reason why I like this is because it's a automatic brake light that senses the second you start slowing down. So that means you don't have to press the brakes on your bike to activate this. This thing will start activating the second you roll off the throttle. I mean, we've all been there, right? You're just riding around, you engine brake, and you don't tap the brakes. How's anybody behind you gonna know? That's exactly what this thing does right here. It does have 3 different modes on it. I like to call this the day mode because it's got the highest contrast, which is really good in bright sunlight. But it does have a night mode where there's constantly a red running light and then the brighter brake light. And then they've got what I like to call a rain mode because it's flashing like a hazard. This has become a piece of safety equipment that I genuinely never ride without. So if you're interested in checking one of these out, click the link down in the description below where you can get $10 off your order. And what do you say we get back to the airbag vest?
Oh, but Spite, I hear you cry. What if I forget to charge it? What then, smarty pants? Well, you're probably gonna be fine because the battery lasts for 30 hours. I've had this thing for over a month now and I've charged it a grand total of like 5 times. It charges really quick too, so an hour on the charger correlates to several hours on the road.
So those are some pretty compelling reasons why you might want to upgrade to this thing, but we do need to talk about fitment because one of the things that annoys me to no end about the old Tech Air 5 is how the fit on this is imprecise, to say the least. Don't get me wrong, this thing is not restricting my movement or anything, but especially around the arms and in the shoulders, I can feel it being tight enough to be annoying. Another thing to point out, there's no stretch mesh anywhere in this jacket, so that means if you've got a tight fit, you go out and eat 1 too many cheeseburgers, this thing is going to feel a little bit more like a brassiere than an airbag vest. That's why the Plasma is such a nice step up, because this thing is stretch mesh everywhere that matters, which means that so long as you're in the right size range, this thing is going to fit perfectly for you. The airbag's also redesigned to cover more of the impact areas that matter. Your ribs and specifically your upper arms have a lot more coverage in this jacket than on the old one, as well as the back protector on here actually molds to fit your back versus this, which is just a giant slab of plastic.
Another big question I get asked about these is, are they comfortable under a jacket? Well, let me show you what Texas is like most days.
Can someone open a window? It's getting a little warm in here.
And while it's not quite the surface of Venus yet, we are getting there. It's between 85 and 95 degrees most of the time out here right now. And under a mesh jacket, this thing really feels more like a base layer, whereas that old one felt like you were stuffing an entire hockey jersey into your jacket, or a sweater, depending on your blood maple syrup content. And because this thing is slimmer, you look a lot less like the Hunchback of Notre Dame when you've got it under a jacket. Don't get me wrong, there is still a pronounced bump where the canister is, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be.
Now we need to talk about compatibility, because you can't just grab any old jacket off the rack and have it work with the airbag vest. There's only one way to tell if your jacket will work, and
I'm afraid we need to use math.
Step 1, measure the circumference of your chest. That is A. Step 2, measure the width of the jacket from armpit to armpit. That's B. The jacket is Tech Air compatible if B is greater than A divided by 2 plus 16 centimeters. Or 6.3 cheeseburgers. Inches.
See, I told you it wasn't all that complicated. The real reason why you want to do this is you want to make sure that the jacket has enough room so that when the airbag goes off, it doesn't squeeze you like a tube of empty toothpaste and blow your noggin right off the top of your shoulders. Or, maybe the airbag will pop. I don't know. I've worn this thing under my race suit and a ton of different jackets, and you'd actually be surprised how many American cut jackets are compatible right out of the gate, because they gotta make room for all of them cheeseburgers.
Okay folks, so this is me on the phone because this is worth shouting out. This is the jacket you saw me measuring. This is a Dainese Superleggera jacket, which is 100% mesh, and this thing is not Tech Air compatible, and you are seeing me wear it in the video. So technically, I'm misusing this thing. That's a Chrome Sport hoodie right there in a 2X, and that's an Alpine Stars jacket that does say it's Tech Air ready, but it does not fit. So that's something that you need to consider when you're buying a jacket. That right there is a Tech Air Andy, or Andy's Air, that is compatible because it's a 3X. And then that right there is an NBT bomber jacket. That is compatible at a 2X because this is American cut and that's European cut. So if you're looking at a European cut jacket and you're a bigger American, you may want to look into a 3X instead of a 2X, or just go one size up. Also, when you put this thing under a jacket, you're gonna wanna take out the shoulder armor and the back armor because it's redundant and it takes up extra space that the airbag needs to expand. I do always leave the elbow armor in, but everything else should come out. Now we need to talk about funk, and not the kind that's your brother, the kind that makes everybody else not want to stand next to you in an elevator. These things reek. One of the biggest complaints with the Tech Air 5 is that you couldn't actually wash this thing. The only way that you can go about cleaning it is like if you're really careful dabbing it with a cloth, or I found a way where you can sort of bunch this back thing up, separate it from the airbag, and then dip it into some water. But other than that, there's no way to separate the airbag and the electronics from the chassis, because the only way to do that is to open up these zippers, which have these locking tabs. And if you tamper with these, it's a lot like tearing the tag off a mattress. The nice thing about the Plasma here is it follows in the off-road's footsteps, and it allows you to remove the airbag and all the electronics from the chassis so that you essentially have an easily washable base layer. Technically, they tell you not to put it in the washing machine, but I have put my Tech Air Off-Road in the washing machine inside out on a delicate cycle, and it's come out totally fine. You just want to make sure you aren't putting either of these in the dryer, because that would be bad. Thing is, you can't machine wash the airbag, and that makes sense. So the only thing you can do there is use a damp cloth to just kind of wipe away some of the salt and slime that's in there. You don't want to be using chemicals and soap and all that stuff. It's just water and a cloth. Now we do have to talk about some of the stuff that annoys me on this jacket, because if Alpine Stars gets nothing but hand-wringing applause, they're not actually going to improve. And I'd like to see some changes to this thing that would make it even better. So first and foremost, this thing needs a kidney belt. I said the same thing about the Tech Air Off-Road. I just feel like it would hold the airbag in place a little bit better. Every now and again, I feel like right around my gut here, which is, you know, American sized, this starts to get a little bit bunched up and it feels uncomfortable. I feel like that kidney belt would really hold the airbag in place where it's supposed to be. Second, and this is another thing that I said about the Tech Air Off-Road at the time, the canisters for this are hard to find. That is a temporary problem and it will be solved, but know that going in, you've only got the one charge in here, and if it goes off, sourcing another one may be a little bit difficult. But just like with the off-road, I feel like a few months down the line, they're gonna have plenty of these things on the shelves. You'll be able to go into any cycle gear and get yourself another one. If I were A-Stars for the second round with this thing, I would start packing a second canister in the box so that buyers don't have to run out and buy another one right out of the gate, just so that they can have two on hand. And while we are talking about the canisters, I do want to mention that these things are good to fly. You can check them so long as they're in the travel mode. However, I did take this thing to California for my off-road adventure with Honda last year, and I had no problem getting it out of Texas. But trying to get these canisters through LAX proved really difficult, and it came down to surrender the entire thing or surrender the canisters. So I did end up losing two of them at the airport. Even though they're argon, even though they're cleared to fly, the security guys just wouldn't let them through. Lastly, I called out this button before on the jacket because this is a great addition. I'm so happy that we don't have to use the app anymore. However, in my experience with the Tech Air Off-Road, that button is a failure point, and not for the reason you're thinking. On both the Plasma and the Off-Road, this button serves as the mode changer as well as the charging port. And on my Off-Road, the actual charging port broke off, meaning that I can no longer charge the jacket. I'm in contact with Alpine Stars to get it fixed. It's a very easy part to swap,
but it is a failure point nonetheless, and I'll have to see how this thing goes. I'm being very ginger with this one, but it is USB-C, and looking at it, I can tell it's a little bit better built. However, if I was Alpine Stars, I would take a cue from the old Tech Air 5 and have the magnetic charging cable that's on here. I think that's a great idea, and I would love to see it on this thing. So there you have it. That's the good, the bad, and the smelly when it comes to the Tech Air 5 Plasma versus the Tech Air 5. So the real question is, if you already have one of these, do you need to run out and upgrade to the Tech Air 5 Plasma? And the answer is probably not. If you've already got one of these, chances are you're a street rider who does maybe the occasional track day. So what I would do is I would just continue wearing this thing until you have your one deployment. Once that happens, then it's time to upgrade. However, if you're like me and you're a rider who does a little bit of everything, track, street, off-road, big adventures, all that stuff, this is the jacket you want. The Plasma right here is a great way to get a bunch of the features that come with the Tech Air Off-Road that make this thing the biggest and baddest airbag out there. You also don't have to spend $1,000 to do it anymore, which is so nice. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, I don't give a what airbag you get so long as you pick up an airbag. If you decide that the Helite is the way you want to go because it's cheaper to service the thing, or because you think I'm bought and paid for and this review doesn't count, I don't care. Just go ahead and get an airbag because it is the best way to make yourself safe on a bike. Motorcycling is dangerous enough already. This is one of the best ways to make sure that you are safer when you're out riding. And that's all that matters to me. However, if you are interested in checking one of these out, there is an affiliate link for Revzilla down in the description below. You will be helping the channel out, or if you decide you don't want to get this and you decide to pick up an exhaust for your bike, you'll also be helping the channel out. And with that, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. A huge shout out to the folks at Revzilla for sending this out to me, and a shout out to you guys for sticking around and watching the whole thing. Catch you guys in the next one. See you later.